This is the third in our Springboard educational webinar series. And I'm really excited to introduce our speaker this evening. This is Sahiba Tandon. Hi, Sahiba. Sahiba is a 2021 graduate from Gwinnett Mercy Academy High School, where she actively competed in informative and oratory across local, regional, and national circuits. That'll be important here in a moment because Sahiba was the 2020 NSDA National Champion in Expository Speaking, which is really exciting. She's a current freshman at Swarthmore College and is pursuing a political science degree with English literature. Is that a double major or is that a minor, Sahiba?
We actually had a bit of a switch. I'm now a political sociology major with an English lit minor.
Very cool. Very cool. So, all right, a double major with a minor. Still on the pre-law track?
Yeah.
Wonderful. She is a student speech and debate coach at Princeton Academy of the Sacred Heart and also coaches privately on the side and judges. So if you are looking for a judge, an experienced judge for your program, please reach out to Sahiba. And Sahiba, I'm going to encourage you to sign up for our judge hire board too at the NSDA so that people know that you're out there and you're available. So I am going to also let you know that Sahiba has a few questions that she wants to ask during the presentation. So please type your answers in the Q&A box or in the chat box. And that way I can read them to her, because once Sahiba starts presenting, she's not going to be able to check those boxes too. If you have any questions, also please include in the Q&A or the chat, either one works. And at the end of Sahiba's presentation, I will read her your questions, and so she'll get to them. But as she's going, if she says anything and you're, oh, I want her to come back to that, go ahead and type it in. I will be sure to read it to her at the end. And with that said, I am very pleased to introduce Sahiba Tandon.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here and talk with you all on rhetorical speaking in speech and debate and what that really looks like for both new and returning students and coaches. We'll be focusing on the three main rhetorical events of informative, expository, and original oratory speaking. And yeah, if you have any questions, like Kelly said, please feel free to drop them in the chat as we go forward. So let's go ahead and get started. So to start off, I wanted to give you all a bit of an icebreaker. So just let us know in the chat if you're a coach or a student and what your experience level is following these questions on the slide, or just on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most experienced. And Kelly will give us an overview of the answers. So go ahead and answer in the chat.
This is fantastic. We've got some answers here. So we've got a coach for middle school and high school, coach with an experience level of 8 or 9. I'm assuming a coach with an experience of 7. The middle school and high school coach is at a 10. And I'm a coach of the Cardinal Gibbons High School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. This is the end of my 7th year coaching this program. And we have a high school student on here as well.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for your responses. No matter where you are in your speech and debate journey, there's always ways to improve and learn more. As a first year out coach and frequent judge, I know I'm still learning new techniques every day on how to better my own rhetorical speaking and how to help others. All right, so just to give an introductory overview today, we'll be going over the basics of rhetorical speaking, the events, the commitment, what it really looks like. Then we'll get into some challenges, what an effective student-coach relationship looks like, some delivery tips, and competition differences you all might see as we juggle COVID. Alrighty. So jumping into the basics, I wanted to give you all a moment to just sit, think, and respond in the chat with what rhetorical speaking really means to you. What is the purpose and why is it important? And I'll just read this quote here as you all answer to help with some reflecting. Of modes of persuasion furnished by the spoken word are three kinds. The first kind depends on the personal character of the speaker, the second on putting the audience into a certain frame of mind, the third on the proof, provided by the words of the speech itself. So go ahead and answer your thoughts in the chat on what rhetorical speaking means to you.
I don't see any answers yet, so I want to make sure I'm not missing something.
I'm sure
There we go. There's one. Yeah, there we go. A rhetorical speech is original. It makes a connection with the audience via some kind of message. It has to use a variety of techniques to enhance that connection. It's great to have ideas, but being able to inform and persuade others makes those ideas even more valuable. And someone said, I like that description.
Awesome. Awesome responses. Thank you, everyone. And we'll definitely get into some of those themes that you all are bringing out as we flesh out the basics more so.
And Sahiba, I just wanted you to know we did have a raised hand. So I just wanted to make sure that if you have any questions, please go ahead and stick them in the chat or and put it in the Q&A, and I will definitely get that over to Sahiba. So I didn't want anyone to feel like you're being ignored.
Thank you for that, Kelly. All right. Okay, so a quick who, what, when, where, why about rhetorical speaking. Who, anyone who's interested, middle school through college tournaments are the most common, but public speaking definitely does not have to be confined to the competitive environment of speech and debate. The what is 5 to 10 minute self-written speeches on a topic of students choosing. And as some quick examples, I've written speeches on swearing, piercings, hypersensitivity, religious freedom, happiness, really anything and everything you could possibly be interested in can be spoken about. The when is August through June / camps over the summer. And we'll get into what the yearly breakdown looks like on a local, regional, national, and online calendar. And then it's pretty simple. As you all mentioned, it is so important to see the value in sharing your voice and opinion on life and issues. And there are proven benefits of effective rhetorical speaking in excelling in life and your interpersonal relationships. Okay, so now to get into the nitty-gritty of everything. Like I said earlier, it's really important to practice public speaking outside of just speech and debate. And what that looks like is having writing and speaking workshops with your team, or even just interested students if you're not like a team yet. Public speaking can be very daunting for younger students, so starting early and small will really help your students work their way up to competing in person and with people you don't know. It's also always good to have more experienced students give tips to the younger students on their delivery, performance, and writing. Starting young doesn't mean competing every weekend. It just means starting to think about what topics you're interested in and practicing the way you speak. And we'll get into why that matters soon. Okay, so I see that there's a bit of a problem with the shared screen. Is the box still coming up now? I want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. Okay, box just disappeared. Awesome.
Yes, we can still see it, but you've moved it over to the corner, so that's perfect because it was just blocking a little bit of what you'd had your information on the slide.
Yeah, you know what I think it is? It's the Zoom box.
Ah,
Let me move it down here so it's out of sight, out of mind. How about that?
good idea. Good idea.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's keep going. Ready. Alrighty, moving into the what. So just a quick intro or maybe refresher on what these events look like and really are. Informative speaking is an 8 to 10 minute self-written and memorized speech on, again, any topic, but it's primarily focused on informing, which includes finding research, facts, and studies, and diving into the history, causes, and various aspects and impacts, whether that be graphically, psychologically, lifestyle, technology, etc. This event is also really cool because you can have visual aids, including but not limited to poster boards, maps, props, etc. I've seen some really, really cool boards and presentations over the last couple of years. Overall, there's a lot of freedom and flexibility with this event, which can be challenging when it comes to finding a topic that's not too broad, but also not too narrow, and figuring out what is the most important information that you really want to share in 10 minutes. Expository speaking is basically just a mini informative speech because it's only 5 minutes and it doesn't require any visual aids, but its purpose and premise is pretty much the same as an informative. And then original oratory is your persuasive speaking event, which is also 8 to 10 minutes, self-written and memorized. But for this event, having a strong thesis is probably one of the most important starting points because that will be the foundation of your speech. Oratory is all about effective argumentation and backing up your opinion on your chosen issue or topic with solid information and analysis. This event is also unique because there's typically a solution section at the end of the cause and effects where you can offer your own creative solutions to the problem that you chose. All 3 events are very dependent on the that you provide, but all you personally can bring to the table, whether that be inserting yourself in the introduction or as a heart moment, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means later. It's important to appeal to both the logical and feeling sides of your audience with both research and anecdotes. And obviously, this all starts with picking a topic that the student really likes, and the coach also feels that is a feasible topic to write and speak about. And obviously, the more you care about it, the more the audience will care. Lastly, when creating the speech, it is crucial to learn to write the way that you speak. And what I mean by that is not writing the way you would write a formal essay or paper, but really writing in your own voice, because at the end of the day, your audience isn't going to be sitting there reading your speech. They're going to be looking at you, engaging with you, listening to you, and really focused on you. All right, so now getting into the logistics of actually competing. One is pretty much all year round from August to June, with many summer camps also being offered for all ages as like speech and debate workshops. Most of your local, regional, and invitational tournaments will be August through March, while states and national tournaments will typically occur March through June. It can definitely be difficult to jump into competition season right at the beginning, but I think online tournaments have really helped teams everywhere with gaining exposure across the country early on and getting feedback really easily through tab room, online, email. And I really recommend taking advantage of the online platforms as much as possible. Competing is all about understanding and accepting that you will only get out as much as you put in. So it's really important to communicate between students and coaches what the students' goals are and how those goals can be achieved based on a competition schedule. So let's say that your student wants to make it to nationals. It's important to know what that really takes, especially when it comes to tournaments like NITOC and POC, which actually have this thing called a bidding system, which basically means that you have to attend and place at a certain amount of tournaments, at certain tournaments. So yeah, it's just really important to lay out your goals very early on and understand what it takes to achieve them. Moving into the where, there are different circuits based on your region, and it's important to gain exposure both locally and nationally, because even state by state, there are very different competition and judging experiences. And when it comes time for nationals in June, it'll only help to have had that exposure early on. There are local leagues in every state that may adhere to the Catholic Forensic League or the National Speech and Debate Association rules. Most states also have their own state championship tournaments as well, which you would have to qualify for, as with most national tournaments. Then there are invitationals that range from regional to national circuit competitions that have the ability to pick and choose which rules to follow. And these will often be your travel tournaments that are hosted by universities and colleges and are typically 2 to 3 days long, but they also may be longer, especially nationals, which tends to stretch out over an entire week. And the travel tournaments were personally and still are some of my favorite to compete in, because you get to meet new people and hear so many cool new speeches from across the country, while also having solid bonding time with your own team, being able to just go out and get dinner and practice together. Really wholesome experience. It's important to know the rules for each competition, especially in middle school, where the timing and memorization protocols of each event may vary from state to state or region to region. So it's very important that both the coach and the student stay up to date on those rules. Back to online competing, having the options of asynchronous and synchronous competitions is really great, because you can always submit a video for the asynchronous and not have to worry about being at the round or competing, and you can get your feedback a couple of days later. But at the same time, you could be synchronously competing the same weekend and getting double the feedback. And again, while it may be difficult to travel to, say, Kentucky and compete in August, online competing allows you to get the same exposure from judges and competitors from your home base, which will really help later on, like I said, for the national circuit tournaments, where judges and competitors will be coming from all over. So that exposure is really, really important. And lastly, just a quick plug for the NSDA Springboard Series, which is open to everyone and free to compete in. So I would definitely encourage taking advantage of this awesome opportunity to practice and get feedback. So why do rhetorical speech? Well, rhetorical speaking is about informing, education, and motivating audiences about what you really care about. It's about learning how to effectively and clearly express your thoughts and ideas, and most importantly, getting feedback and improving. And I cannot stress this enough. It will come up again in another 20 minutes. Speech and debate is all about progress and improving. And the way you do that is by practicing and getting feedback. It's really important. So now we're going to move into some challenges. And I ask that you all enter into the chat some challenges that you might encounter as a first-time coach or competitor, or maybe what are some of the challenges that you have encountered, as most of you seem to be pretty experienced with speech and debate. What are some areas with students or with coaches, with competing and judges, some challenges that you have encountered? If you want to go ahead and enter those into the chat, we can share those out.
All right, our first response is the coach has found it challenging to help students find a topic that they connect to.
That's definitely a very, very good point.
And lack of motivation is a greater challenge with online tournaments, but my area transitioned back in person around January. Students that are involved in so many activities, also making sure that administration and other teachers and coaches in the school understand speech and debate.
For sure. And we'll definitely come back to that lack of motivation piece, both transitioning back to like a in-person environment and also how to balance. And again, emphasizing again that you're only going to get out what you put in, but we'll definitely come back to that. Back to the point about helping students find a topic that they connect to. Especially with first-time competitors, it can be really frustrating because you're interested in so many different areas and you don't know where to start. But I would say, as a great resource, TED Talk and YouTube and the NSDA website has videos of so many great people delivering speeches about topics and different areas of interest. So I would definitely recommend sending your students out on like a YouTube scavenger hunt and just putting in words of things that they're interested in and going from there.
We got one more. Visual aids and boards are a challenge in our league where interactive boards are expected.
I definitely agree with that. I had a lot of challenges with visual aids because there's definitely that expectation when it comes to national tournaments to stand out with your boards. And as much as I personally think that delivery is as important as your boards, you will definitely come across tournaments where you'll see people sort of competing with their boards rather than just competing with their speech. So that's definitely a really great point. Alrighty. So when it comes to the challenges of how to write and perform, it's important to prioritize structure as a foundation and research and anecdotes as a supporting block. A typical outline for these speeches includes an introduction with an attention getter, like a personal anecdote, a statement of significance for why your topic matters, and your thesis and roadmap, which talks your audience through your points of argumentation. Then you would move into the body of your speech, which, as we discussed, could include history, causes, effects, solutions, implications, anecdotes. And then everything gets tied up in the end nicely with a conclusion. In terms of performance, it's all about practice and talking conversationally and in your own voice. What that looks like is practicing in front of a mirror and in front of your peers and coach to get feedback on making sure you're not slipping into a pattern and making sure you're being as evocative and true to yourself as possible. Declamation is a great starting event for new and young students who just want to dip their toes into rhetorical speaking, really get a feel for what a speech and its purpose is. For students, again, practice makes perfect, but it's also important to be patient with yourself as you go through the writing and editing process. Writer's block is definitely no joke, but accepting that making mistakes is okay and not feeling defeated at the end of the day is what will really help you push through. It's all about making progress, and that comes with being able to accept critiques from your peers, coaches, and judges, even though it might be hard, and revisiting your speech frequently. And I mean like all the time to make edits. I probably went through at least 40 drafts of my expository speech before submitting the final one. And I think that's what it's all about. If you're ending the year with the same exact speech that you started with at the beginning of the year, that's not sort of the progress that you would want to be seeing with your speech. For coaches, try to be as encouraging and supportive as possible. I wouldn't be here today without my coach and all of her guidance and direction all 4 years. This comes with checking in frequently and giving friendly nudges about deadlines and where the student should be in terms of writing and practicing. It can be really easy to slip into, oh, I'll just do it next week, I'll just do it tomorrow. But when it comes to goal setting, it's really important to hold yourself accountable. Supportive coaching also comes with celebrating both wins and losses, which we'll get into a little bit more in a moment. It's important to hold a competitor accountable, especially if they have long-term goals like making it to nationals, as we gave a scenario earlier. Goal setting will really help set the boundaries for your relationship with your student and determine what the year will look like with your student. This includes both short-term goals like when to submit a video and also long-term goals of which exact tournaments you're competing at and holding yourself to those deadlines. Now, to focus in on the student-coach relationship, which is so critically important in speech and debate, I want to open with this quote and then ask you all to reflect on what qualities make a supportive and successful student-coach relationship. The coach is not a problem solver, a teacher, an advisor, an instructor, or even an expert. They are a sounding board, facilitator, who raises awareness and responsibility. So please go ahead and answer in the chat, and then we can share out and move forward.
Listening to each other, both the student and the coach.
Definitely agree with that one.
Let's see if we get any more. Remembering that a coach is not a friend, but one that guides and allows a student to have their own victories and failings and learning from both.
Definitely. And you can learn a lot from both those wins and losses, and we'll talk about that.
Oh, here's a good one. I think one of the most important aspects of coaching is getting to know the student beyond merely their competitive event and performance. Who are they? How can you motivate them? what are the best ways to help this young person reach their goals in school and in life? And someone said, yes.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Because I think a lot of the times, I mean, rhetorical speaking sort of bleeds into all aspects of your life. And in order to be the most successful expresser of your opinions, you need to be able to tap into all aspects of yourself, especially your emotions and your feelings. And things can get in the way of that in your life. And I definitely support communication like that with your coach. All right. So similar to what you all have brought up, a solid relationship is built on celebrating both wins and losses and seeing competitions and speech and debate as an activity separate from winning and losing, and more about participation and being willing to make changes and progress and really valuing feedback. The student will likely want to compete all the time and make it to nationals and place, and they might be extremely disheartened if that doesn't happen. But it's important to remember that the only thing you can really control is your attitude about competing and remembering what you're really in it for at the end of the day. It's also important to keep in touch with your capacity for work and knowing again that you will only get out what you put in. You can't expect to overwork yourself or underwork yourself and get the same results at the end of the day. Trophies are great, but it's all about progress and improving yourself to be the most effective speaker that you can be. Alrighty, now moving on, we're going to get into some delivery tips and tricks. And I wanted to start with a short clip from President Obama's 50th anniversary speech of Selma, and then ask you all, what are some things that stand out to you? So we'll just play 2 minutes of this, and then you all can answer the things that stood out to you in the chat.
We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created. These are not just words. They're a living thing, a call to action, a roadmap for citizenship, and an insistence in the capacity of free men and women to shape our own destiny. For founders like Franklin and Jefferson, for leaders like Lincoln and FDR, the success of our experiment in self-government rested on engaging all of our citizens in this work. And that's what we celebrate here in Selma. That's what this movement was all about. One leg in our long journey toward freedom. The American instinct that led these young men and women to pick up the torch and cross this bridge, that's the same instinct that moved patriots to choose revolution over tyranny. It's the same instinct that drew immigrants from across oceans and the Rio Grande. The same instinct that led women to reach for the ballot, workers to organize against an unjust status quo. The same instinct that led us to plant a flag at Iwo Jima and on the surface of the moon. It's the idea held by generations of citizens who believe that America is a constant work in progress, who believe that loving this country requires more than singing its praises or avoiding uncomfortable truths. It requires the occasional disruption, the willingness to speak out for what is right, to shake up the status quo. That's America.
Alrighty, I hope you all enjoyed that clip. And now please take a moment to note some things that stood out to you in the chat, and it can be anything.
Okay, we've got a few comments. President Obama doesn't rush through the speech. He leaves important moments of reflection for the audience via pauses at the end of important statements. Also, his gestures are effective and match the intensity of the speech in any given moment. Finally, I'm a sucker for serial repetition to emphasize points and make them memorable, the same instinct, quote unquote. President Obama has always been so great with respecting the pause. giving the audience a moment to digest what he is saying. He understands that a speech is really a dialogue with the audience. He can be a little rhythmic in his speaking style, but his passion is awesome. I would say that rhythmic thing kind of lulled me. I'll just say that. It's very reminiscent of like Black preachers. So I think it's kind of an acquired taste too. So it could have been very appropriate for that audience. I don't know. I'll just say that. Effective use of pausing and changes in pace to emphasize, beautiful use of rhetorical devices and techniques such as repetition and imagery. Powerful use of repetition. Yeah, that's come up a couple times. He utilizes rhetorical devices like repetition.
Alrighty, awesome. Thank you guys so much. And those, like the repetition and the techniques, are definitely going to come up in a second. But I also agree. I think President Obama has always been so great at being such a passionate speaker and really respecting the pause, as you guys mentioned. Alrighty.
We the people, in order to form.
Alrighty, so for the delivery overview, I have 6 E's that we're going to focus on today: eye contact, emotion, energy, expression, excitement, and ending strong. So eye contact is all about getting one-on-one and personal with your audience. Now on Zoom, what that looks like is maintaining eye contact with the camera, and in person, that looks like shifting across the room to every member in the audience. And not just focusing on your judges, not just focusing on one person, but really giving everyone in the room the attention that you want to get back. Emotion is the one way that you can really stand out to your judges. And that comes from focusing on what you are trying to say and what you are really trying to convey to the audience and what you want them to get out of it at the end of the day. Ethos is one of the most effective ways to argue and to just inform. The third E here is energy, and that's also another thing that the audience will remember. The minute that you walk up, they will be able to feel your energy and they will feed off of it. So the more positive you make that energy and the more evocative and immersive and entertaining you are, the more your audience will be pulled in and really stick with you for the entire 5 or 10-minute speech. Now, expression is sort of a combination of emotion and energy. And what this really means is engaging your facial expressions and your voice through vocal intonation and vocal variation, and also your hand gestures to really pull in the audience in again and keep them entertained and not bored, especially when you might have a period of 2 to 3 minutes when you're just giving some facts or you're just going through the history of something. It's really important to be as expressive as you can be with all parts of your upper body. Excitement is probably the #1 thing that my coach grilled into me, and that is, if you're happy to be there, your audience will be happy to be there. And you might be nervous, you might have stage fright, but fake it till you make it. If you walk up there with a smile on your face, I can almost 100% guarantee you that even through a mask, you will see the audience's eyes crinkle up and smile, because they just want to know that you're happy to be there and that you really want to be there, and that will stick with them at the end. And lastly, ending strong. The way you start and end really lasts in the judges' minds. It's so important to make that lasting impression and to really push through with all of that energy and expression and excitement till the very last minute, no matter how tired you are. Be able to walk away feeling empowered and happy with your performance, because that's all that you can really control. How you feel about your performance is the most important thing. Above ranks and medals and trophies, you should be able to walk away feeling like you did the best that you absolutely could. And now I'm going to play a couple minutes of 2 speeches, one of which is my expository speech I won with in 2020 over quarantine, and the second is the 2019 Informative Champion. And just look out for some like key differences between presenting yourself through a screen versus presenting yourself in person. So yeah, go ahead and play a little bit. And please let me know if you can't hear, or if there are audio issues. Yeah.
Cheese and crackers, what the duck is going on in our world right now? We've got a fudging global pandemic, murder hornets, gosh darn witches, riots, heck, even aliens. wonderful world of profanity. So if you are easily offended or get uncomfortable, you can get the truck out. See what I did there? First, we'll swear our way through the history of these words. Family style, don't worry. Next, we'll dive into how swearing is viewed today, before finally taking a look at the positive and negative impacts it's proven to have on our lives. So where the fiddlesticks does profanity come from anyway? According to Melissa Moore's 2013 book, A Brief History of Swearing, swear words got their power from sexual taboos in ancient Rome. But in the Old Testament or Hebrew Bible, religious taboos that attacked Christ's physical body became more offensive than any sexual obscenity. Later, the Renaissance, Augustine, and Victorian eras developed modern swear words and established euphemisms. However, in the 20th century, these modern words turned into racial slurs, began to divide the country into two halves: people of color and people lacking color. Comedians like Lenny Bruce attempted to neutralize swear words so that they held no meaning in everyday life. And then came the 60s with the hippies, and casual vulgarity became the norm. Today, swearing can be a powerful way to express our emotions, offering catharsis as a response to physical and emotional pain, and adding humor to situations that may get a little awkward without. Now that we know where the shiitake mushroom swearing comes from, let's get into myth-busting some common prejudices. Cursing is often viewed as an escape for lacking a sufficient vocabulary, and an excuse to lie. However, Dr. J, a co-author of a 2015 study published in Language Sciences, discovered that fluency has a direct correlation to swearing, and doesn't make an individual any less intelligent, and even makes people more honest. So if you can say otorhinolaryngology, you can also say mother beeping beep of a beep. I'll let you use your imagination. However, many people will hear these words and use them as a means to discriminate in terms of race, gender, and religion. At a time when our country seems to be taking steps backwards instead of forwards when it comes to achieving racial justice, profanity has become an outlet for many to express their opinions. As Benjamin K. Bergen, a linguist and cognitive science professor at UC San Diego states, profanity in activism is a double-edged sword. But while phrases like F the police may be unpleasant to hear, it has become a battle cry for many. And while traditional methods like voting may seem like a safer, more protected version to come about change, profanity may be more expressive and an outlet for those who are unable to vote. As a scholar, author, and professor of sociology, Sahiba Gordon states, young people are saying, if you're going to break the social contract and stop acting like guardians, then we're going to break the contract on our ends and stop acting like children. But if you've been keeping in touch with the Black Lives Matter movement, you've seen countless protesters arrested and detained for speaking out and using profanity as a means to express their bottled and valid rage, making us question how much the First Amendment actually protects us. Shucks. So obviously swearing impacts how people view you. Like if I had just stood up here and cursed for 5 minutes straight, I'm pretty sure I would have reserved the last spot on that ballot. But as Emma Byrne displays in her 2017 book, new research reveals that profanity has many positive virtues. Psycholinguists have remarked that taboo words communicate emotional information more effectively than non-taboo words, and allow us to vent our anger without getting physical. As protests have broken out in all 50 states and around the globe, the Black Lives Matter movement is encouraging people to use their voices instead of physical aggression to make change. Research also shows that cursing can help us endure pain. When undergraduates repeated a strong swear word, they were on average able to keep their hands submerged in icy water for about 40 seconds longer than repeated a neutral word. They also rated their pain as less intense. So obviously, swearing can emotionally coerce us and others into decision making. While I don't recommend greeting your judges with the finger, you can guess which one. Today we established how it's important to know when it is and isn't appropriate to swear. We learned that while profanity does not affect your intelligence, it may affect your first impressions. The stigma surrounding this form of expression may convince the upcoming generation to be mindful of what language they use. Or it might not. Personally,
Righty, I hope you all enjoyed that. And now we'll watch a little bit of Jordan's speech.
Slave trade. When Africans were brought to the New World, they were forced to accommodate to European standards, which viewed straight hair as the highest standard of beauty. And in an attempt to blend into their new society, Africans took extreme measures to achieve these silky strands. In 1905, Madam C.J. Walker created a line of hair products called the Walker system, consisting of iron combs, known today as the hot comb, relaxers, and other types of lotions. These products were used specifically to straighten black hair, which led Madam C.J. Walker to become the first female millionaire in the United States. So African Americans wore their hair straight. Well, that is until Angela Davis broke the status quo with her beautiful black afro. Her afro was a reminder that African Americans should love their natural hair. Despite society's standards of beauty, the fro was a powerful political sign that further moisturized the civil rights movement that pushed for African American culture acceptance and worth. But unfortunately, wearing hairstyles such as Angela Davis's fro has led to many misjudgments in our society then and even now. African Americans are being taught to wear their hair straight, to land a job, a promotion, or to even be accepted. Hampton University, a historically black university, placed a ban on dreadlocks and cornrows in their classrooms in 2001. Despite the outrage from the African American community, this ban was successful in earning students jobs in corporate America. But this doesn't start in college. Elementary school students have been suspended from school for hairstyles that, quote, distract from the learning process. When we ban such hairstyles, we fail to see the underlying impact on our youth. For example, Melissa Harris Perry, former talk show host of MSNBC who wore her hair in braids, received an email from a viewer about her daughter. Her daughter watched the show not because she wanted to see the news, but she was excited to see someone who looked like her on national television. The viewer later stated that watching Melissa Harris Perry's talk show kept her daughter's dream of becoming a model alive. The lasting impression was beautiful, smart, an accomplished black woman could wear their hair in braids too.
So lastly, as you probably noticed, there were some key differences in the way that me and Jordan presented ourselves via screen versus in person. I will wholeheartedly admit it is so difficult to feed off of people's energies and really feel that excitement and passion through a screen and be able to present that back to your audience. But it's important to just be present at all times and listen to other people's speeches and get pumped up yourself. You're able to compete with people from across the country or across your district while sitting at home or sitting in a classroom with your team, and that's such an awesome opportunity. In person, obviously be mindful of the masking policies, but also take up that space that you have. Over Zoom, space becomes very limited, so really own that room with your presence when you can compete in person. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you all so much for tuning in. And now we have time to answer a few questions if you all want to drop them into the chat or into the Q&A box.
Can I just say, Sahiba, that was really exciting to see the difference in your delivery versus the other video. I thought you did a great job of keeping your gestures small. So I had a question for you. I just wrote it down. One of the things I noticed in Springboard, because we do a lot of asynchronous online tournaments and scrimmages, I should say. They're not tournaments, they're scrimmages. Sometimes I get a chance to read the feedback from the judges. And on occasion, I have seen a judge comment on the gestures and saying that they felt the students' gestures were distracting.
Interesting.
Can you talk about that for a moment? Like, how do you keep from that happening on video?
Yeah, for sure. So on video, like I mentioned, like space is very difficult to combat. And like you want to make sure that you are taking up that box as much as possible, but also very difficult to like, because in person in this classroom right now, I could be making gestures like this, but to you, those are coming off the screen and those can be like distracting and in your face and really like even covering my face and really taking away from the presentation. So online and in person, that's a really key difference because in person, you have people sitting like 8 to 10 feet of 8 to 10 feet away. So you have that room to be big. But when you're in a compact screen, you really can't be without taking away from your facial expressions or from like the rest of your presentation. So it's really important to practice in video and like just jumping on a Zoom call with your coach or even just with yourself and catching yourself going out of bounds and making sure you're not stiff or really restricting yourself, but just being mindful of the gestures that you're making, that they're not in your face or outside of the screen, and just keeping them compact but meaningful, if that makes sense. But it's definitely very challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense. I like what you said about practicing on Zoom with your coach.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I wonder how many students actually do that. And I do wonder how many coaches might be able to speak to that on this call. But we do have some questions in the chat and I don't want to hog the Q&A time. All right, our first question. Would you say that the smiling part applies to debate events like Congress, when we sometimes discuss really serious topics or play the role of senators?
So here's my thing. I have judged a couple of Congress rounds this year. And I would definitely say, like, when I'm judging Congress, I'm really like, I'm paying attention to your content and your argumentation for sure. But I'm also really paying attention to that energy and that excitement, because a lot of the times with debate events, it's very easy to slip into just like talking fast and like trying to get out as much information as possible. And at that point, it feels like I'm just like reading someone's speech and I'm not getting like the personal aspect. And with that, I do think like not just smiling, but in general, just engaging your face and your hand gestures is really, really important and can really take your performance in like a Congress round to the next level, because the judge is going to see that you're putting in that personal expression, and that's going to separate you from maybe other students who are really just focusing on getting out as much information as possible.
Excellent. I'm going to do one more Q&A and then I'm going to go into the chat.
Awesome.
Can you go over how to put your speeches together? Specifically, how did you select your topic, research your topic, and put your thoughts together to write your speech?
Right. Yeah, definitely. So the way that I selected my topic, I would say I sat down with my coach and we were just talking about things that I find interesting over the years that I've learned about in school even, or that I was interested about before high school, before competing, that I thought were just really interesting. And I brought up declamation as a starting event because that's a really great way to just spend an hour or two on YouTube and watch other people and see what you lean towards more. Are you leaning towards things like science or more abstract things like feelings, interpersonal relationships? But from there, I think my first step is always to gather as much research as possible, because from the research, you can always like narrow your focus. And like having a rough outline is great, which is like having the history. If you want to talk about history, what about the history? How far back do you want to go? If you want to talk about causes, are you going to talk about the brain, or are you going to talk about other people or other aspects? And then with effects, are you going to talk about the workplace? Are you going to talk about speech and debate? Are you going to talk about school? How broad are those implications? Are they global? Are they national? So starting with that outline, and then from there, feeding in as much research as possible, and then cutting it down from there and adding in your own wording and your thoughts and your opinions really helps to bring speeches together. But I'm definitely here and around to help with that more so in depth if you ever need help with that.
That's very generous of you to offer your help, your expertise. All right, we have a few questions in the chat.
Yes.
Why do you think that highly successful national circuit competitors in rhetorical speech sound so similar? Do coaches and judges have a bias against different delivery styles, especially in oratory?
Yeah, this is a really good question because especially as a private coach, I work with someone on the East Coast, and I've seen so many differences by coastal region on delivery styles. And this is exactly what I mean by the importance of gaining exposure with online tournaments. Because again, it might not be feasible for someone living like me in Pennsylvania to travel for the weekend to California and get that exposure, but it's really important to understand how East Coast versus West Coast, like the Midwest, how they understand like the most effective delivery, because I definitely think it differs by region. And I don't know, I think a lot of coaches do have the same methods, but it's so interesting to see like different delivery styles, and what works in certain tournament settings definitely doesn't work in others. And that's kind of unfair in all honesty. And there's not much you can really do about that besides just finding a healthy medium while still like staying true to yourself and how you actually want to perform.
Yeah, still speaking in your voice, as you
Yeah,
mentioned
exactly.
earlier.
That's the best that you can do at the end of the day. You can try to conform to other people's delivery styles as much as you want, but it's never going to be as effective than being yourself and talking in your voice.
Mhm. Another question. Should we coach students to look directly into the camera as opposed to themselves or a judge on the screen? Eyes would drop a little lower when using a laptop for a tournament.
Yeah, this is a good like technical question. So I always say, and what I did is look directly at the camera. And a lot of the times I would catch myself looking at the judge in the corner or looking at myself to check my space. And I would get comments like, oh, where are you looking? So it's kind of like really important to just stay looking. If you're going to look at the judge, only look at the judge. The important thing is that you're not like looking around or it looks like you're looking off screen. And I will come back to the question earlier that practicing on Zoom will really help with that, because you can record yourself or even record yourself on your laptop and be like, oh my gosh, it looks like I'm reading. It looks like I'm doing something else. So what I recommend is directly looking at the camera. But if the one thing you can do is just to stay focused on one area of the screen as opposed to looking around.
Excellent. All right, we have one more question right now. So if anybody else has questions, please go ahead and type them in, because if we don't have any more, this is going to be Sahiba's last question for this evening. Why did you love competing in rhetorical events? Why do you love coaching rhetorical events?
All right, so the reason that I love competing in rhetorical events, in all honesty, is because I really love declamation, starting off as a freshman and a sophomore, but I really wanted to be able to say my own words. Declamation is basically a 8 to 10 minute speech, but it's not yours. So it can be somebody else's, like a commencement address, a TED talk. Basically what differentiated declamation from other rhetorical speaking events is being able to say what I really want to. And the reason I love coaching them is because I think getting as personal as you possibly can in a speech is the best thing that you can do. And what I really want to do is hear people's thoughts and opinions and hear their personal stories. And the best way you can do that is through informative, expository, and oratory, because those are your words and not anybody else's. And I don't know, I just think it's really important to have dialogue like that.
We got some more questions that came in. Thank you for taking time to answer all of these, Sahiba. One question we just received is, if you don't know the answer to a question, how do you respond?
If I don't know the answer to a question, how should we respond? Interesting. I guess I'm curious as a follow-up question in what setting, but I guess if you're a coach and your student is asking you a question about a delivery or a rule, let's say like CL versus NSDA, what does a ballot look like? What does this look like? The best thing that you can do is turn to people who are more experienced, and don't be afraid to turn your student to other coaches and alumni, and set up a meeting with maybe seniors or students who are in college or other people that you know. I think the best way to answer questions is to get communication with people who have more experience. Oh, during crossfire time. I see. So
Okay.
I'm not a
Thank
debate
you.
person. If they ask a question, how should we respond if we don't know the answer? I'm not a debate person, but I would say I would try to redirect it. Maybe ask them to rephrase the question if it's a clarity issue. But I don't know. Here's a point where I would turn it over to someone who's more experienced in debate, because I would not know how to answer.
Excellent question. We actually do have another webinar. I've been at NSDA since September. And within a day of me starting, we hosted one of these educational webinars. And the coach who actually spoke on rebuttal basics, and had a section in there on crossfire and how to respond.
I should have attended that.
If you're interested, I can send you that link. All right, we've got a couple more questions, because we're going to have a link to this recording as well on the NSDA website, and that's what we do. We want to make sure that we create a good resource library for our coaches, our judges, our students, our advisors, everyone who are members and non-members. We definitely want you to be able to access these resources and use them widely. Okay. Sahiba, who are your speech influences outside of your coach and your teammates?
I would say fellow competitors, first of all. Like, I think most importantly, fellow competitors, and especially people older to me. I have made so many connections with, when I was like junior, sophomore, freshman, with seniors who weren't on my team, who were in the district or even across the country. Like, I had friends in Texas and in California, and they were definitely some of my biggest speech influences, because like I've said multiple times, like those coastal differences are really, really like you can really tell the coastal differences when you go and compete at national circuit tournaments. So they were definitely some great influences for me to learn from, and how I can better like mold myself a little bit to like the like tri-coastal experience. But I would say outside of other people, definitely like Barack Obama and a lot of talk show hosts. Honestly, that's kind of embarrassing. I feel like because speech and debate people take it as such a like serious activity, but I think like talk show hosts are a great way to learn how to be conversational, because all they do is talk to other people and talk to the audience and learn how to be funny and interpersonal. And I don't know, I feel like talk show hosts are a great way to be influenced on how to talk in your own voice. I don't know, that might seem silly. I don't know if I've ever heard that one either, but
I would think game show hosts too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
I've often thought that about game show hosts.
Yeah, getting people riled up for sure.
So I just put the Rebuttal Basics webinar link in the chat, and we do have one more question here. Do you know any tricks to make boards more interactive, like creative reveals other than using Velcro?
Yeah.
We've been dinged by judges and informative for presenting a solution after explaining the topic that happens to be a problem. Is this just maybe a regional norm?
Okay, so for the first question, some easy tricks. I go to the storybook is one of my all-time favorites. And storybook means it's just like, you can make like fold a poster board and have like 5 or 6 flaps and just like flip through them. I have used that multiple times for like a history section. Other than that, magnets are a great way to move things around the board and add things on. My coach and I, as of like my junior year, so like 2 years ago, completely got rid of Velcro. It was too noisy, got too many complaints. It was not durable. So I would definitely recommend switching to magnets. And they're just so much easier to work with. And other than that, I would definitely check the rules with the tournaments that you're competing at. But I've seen a lot of people use like light fixtures and other like sort of unveiling techniques that include like carving out places in the board where you can insert certain things. There's definitely ways to get creative with it. It's just about wanting to put in that effort and that time. Magnets are a go-to, and storybook and lights. I don't know, three easy tricks. There you go.
Do we have any other questions?
The second question, I forgot. The second.
Oh, yes. No. So the second part of that question, they were kind of together. So, okay. We've been deemed by judges informative for presenting a solution after explaining the topic that happens to be a problem. Is that a regional norm? Okay, I'm so sorry. Those were different. My apologies.
I don't think that's a regional norm as much as it is like a rule. So again, there's a difference between informative and persuasive in that you're informing at versus like persuading to. And with informative, if you're picking a problem like global warming, right? That is a generally accepted problem. So if you were to present that as a thesis statement, you wouldn't necessarily be like, global warming is a problem we need to solve. It would be like, global warming is something that has continually been affecting the state of our world for the last 20 some years, and we are progressively getting worse, but the implications are far reaching, and this is why we should care. So it would be less. So in terms of a regional norm, I don't think it is. I think it's just about presenting the problem as a topic where you can show both positive and negative implications. And that might be hard for something like global warming. But it's about finding like that healthy balance where you're not trying to persuade your audience that global warming is bad or that it is something that should be fixed, but rather focusing on implications. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
I hope so too. If not, please let us know in the Q&A and or in the chat, I'm sorry. And I apologize again that I made those into one question. I thought totally that it was a continuation there. My apologies. Yeah. So they were 2 different questions. Okay, well, we got a thanks. So I think your answer was sufficient.
Awesome.
And I cannot thank you enough, Sahiba, for today. And I'm so happy you're putting your contact information in the chat. If anybody wants to reach out, here is how to reach out to Ms. Sahiba Tandon. And we are just so grateful. So I want to encourage everyone to please keep her contact information. She has offered her expertise. And I also want to say thank you to everyone who came out tonight and spent an hour with us. My name is Kelly Etzel, and I am the online speech and debate competition coordinator. And I am very happy to be here today. Springboard is my baby. So I love the Springboard shout out today, Sahiba. And we have a series of, thank you. We have a series of webinars, of which this is the 3rd one, as I mentioned earlier. Our last webinar is next Monday. So please join us if you've ever wanted to know more about ProCon Challenge. The webinar will be on ProCon Challenge, and it will be hosted and led by a coach of a national champion. So this week you heard from a national champion. Next week you will hear from the coach of a national champion in ProCon Challenge. And I am just beyond grateful for Coach Raymond Shea for introducing me to Sahiba and for her agreeing to do this tonight. So if you have any questions at all that you want to follow up on, I will put my email in the chat. You are welcome to follow up with me at any time. And I thank you for joining us this evening. and encourage you to please come back and join us next Monday for our last series, our last webinar in the series. And I also encourage you to reach out to me if you have any questions about Last Chance Qualifier. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you all so much. Please feel free to reach out. Thank you for coming.